William Washington enjoys working outdoors. That's because he spent the previous 41 years in a place like this. The 59-year-old from Detroit is one of dozens of inmates sentenced to life without parole for crimes committed when they were juveniles, who have been released after the Supreme Court ruled such mandatory sentences were cruel and unusual punishment.
You know, sometimes you think, okay, well, maybe I do deserve to be locked up for 40, 50 years. And then sometimes anger sets in and be like, hell no, I don't deserve this.
The Associated Press looked into how judges and prosecutors in all 50 states are weighing the cases of so-called juvenile lifers after the Supreme Court said that all but the rare irredeemable juvenile criminal should have a chance at parole one day. The AP found the odds of release or continued imprisonment vary greatly, making justice seem arbitrary. Some juvenile lifers have been resentenced and released. Others, like Johnny Beck Jr., have not.
No person that I know is the same at 25, 30, 35 that they were at 16.
Beck was 16 when he gunned down a fellow teenager in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1995.
When you're a teenager, you tend to just act without considering the consequences a lot of times.
In their decision, the justices cite research showing the brains of adolescents are still developing.
Essentially, you're working with a very active brain, but one that doesn't have the inhibition. So sometimes we call, we liken the teenager to a Ferrari with weak brakes.
Making them more susceptible than adults to peer pressure and likelier to commit reckless acts without considering the long-term effects. The High Court's decision is reopening old wounds for victims' families.
It's just something that's so awful, you really just don't want to relive it. I mean, because you hear the details of how he was murdered.
Eugene DeLuca was shot and killed by 17-year-old Joseph Evans during a robbery at DeLuca's Philadelphia clothing store nearly 40 years ago. His granddaughters, Denise and Stephanie, say they might have been open to Evans' release had he shown any remorse in court.
It was hard to not go over to him and just shake him and be like, are you serious?
Since the Supreme Court set out the possibility of release for Evans and thousands of others, states have headed in decidedly different directions. Pennsylvania has resentenced 1 in 5 of its 517 juvenile lifers. Evans got a new sentence of 30 years to life, making him eligible for release, but the state parole board said not yet. In Michigan, 22 have been released.
Case number.
Bobby Hines wants to join that group.
Bobby was 15 years old at the time, so he was the youngest of the 3 co-defendants. He did not have a weapon.
But he was present when a man was killed over a friend's drug debt. In the year since his 1989 conviction, Hines earned his GED and developed a reputation as a solid worker in prison.
He's been in prison for over 2/3 of his life.
But it may have been the words of the victim's sister.
I forgave him the day that it happened.
And father that helped his case the most.
He can go home today.
The judge resentenced him to a sentence that made him eligible for parole.
You're going to get credit for 10,181 days served.
He's due to be released in September. Mike Householder, Associated Press, Detroit.